And he says, listen, don't worry about it. I won't out-qualify George for the rest of the season. What? Go on, Baxley. What's he talking about? Because
I didn't understand. I can't explain that. I mean, the only
Sabotage. It might be like 1 or 2 sessions quicker than Lewis, but 7-1 just feels wrong. And then Lewis pulls fire on that flame by coming out in front of the world's press and media and saying, well, I had all this pacing in free practice. I don't know what's happened. I don't know where it's gone. Maybe they're turning down my car. And all of a sudden, Baxter, you have yourself a situation, right?
And he will see going up against Charles Leclerc across one lap as a proper challenge. You know, he knows George is fast, and I keep going back to this caveat, he's had some issues with setups and everything else, but he'll be confident that he could probably beat George across the rest of the season, despite what he said in that interview. He's got that self-belief of, I'm the best, even at 39 years of age.
How do we know that Lewis has lost a step, if we know at all? Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shakedown. With me as always, one of my co-hosts, Sir Baxley. How are you doing, sir? It doesn't matter for the avoidance of
I was going to get in before you.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you're doing. We're missing Shez today because Shez is on annual leave. He's sunning himself. How very dare he when there is F1-ish to speak about. So Baxley, how did you ingest the Monaco Grand Prix this weekend just past? Was it boring or the greatest Grand Prix that you've ever seen in your life?
Well, it certainly made my train journey more entertaining because I was... people may notice I'm back in a rather familiar location. It means I'm on my singing travels, and also hence why my voice is a bit croaky because I've been singing quite high today. But no, it was boring as hell. I mean, the red flag just killed the race. I mean, the red flag needed to be thrown. I don't think there's any question about that. Huge crash on lap 1, but it once again raises the debate about the rules, about can you change the car, and changing tyres and using that to make the mandatory pit stop. And because it's Monaco, it just killed any strategy contest. It just became a who can manage their tyres better. And even then, even if you manage your tyres well, you then can't pass. And pace management and everything else. I was invested in it for Charles. I was invested in it for the Mercedes boys and whether they could keep Max in between them, which they did. But other than that, it was pretty boring.
It was just the Charles Leclerc Grand Prix, wasn't it? That was the only thing, and that was brilliant, right? We can talk about that ad infinitum, the emotion that comes along with that Charles finally getting over the hump and destroying the Monaco curse, and that was that for sure was a feel-good moment, Baxley. I was disappointed, however, with the fact that Sky Sports, our mates Crofty and Brundle, in the latter stages of the Grand Prix didn't necessarily do the moment justice. It was epic, right? And you were made to feel, or at least should have been made to feel, a certain way about Charles Leclerc and his story and the passing of his dad and the adversity that he's had to overcome. The fact that he told the cheeky pork he was, his dad was on his deathbed no less, that he'd already signed for an F1 team. That's what we needed to hear, right? As punters, as paying members of Sky Sports F1. Instead, Crofty and Brundle, I felt, dropped the ball, especially when compared with Alex Jakes and bloody Italian commentators. True or false, Baxley?
Yeah, I mean, I like Crofty's line, talking about how his dad was a hairdresser and that he was a cut above the rest. I thought that was good, but when you compare it to Jakesy, I mean, Jesus, Jakesy just was unreal. That was top tier stuff. That was so. They were both nice sound bites, and I think if you were comparing the two, you would go with Jakesy every day of the week. But
Baxley, I think this might be the beginning of the end of my tenure with Sky Sports F1. I felt robbed, and only just by curiosity did I go back and listen to the other. It just felt that's not doing the moment justice. Now, David Croft, isn't the time for quips, right? Speak to it properly. It's not as if he doesn't have the capacity or the talent. because Crofty doesn't lack for competence, but the fact that he misread the room ever so slightly, right? Like low hanging tropes and flippant quips don't do justice the seismic, the gargantuan moment that was Charles Leclerc's overcoming, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first time this season that one of his quips hasn't landed. I mean, when Lando won in Miami, there was the joke about the orange politician who had been visiting them, which didn't land well with people. I mean, I think F1 broadcasting, I think, is going to go through a massive sea change, and I think sports broadcasting in general is kind of. I'll briefly touch upon this because this is a wider discussion, but I think we are headed towards a streaming model, and F1 will just say, "Look, we've given you the broadcast rights, that's great, but now we're going to pull it in house and do everything in house and create and make F1 TV completely global." And then have different language branches, have an Italian branch, have a German branch, have a Spanish branch, bring in those guys who worked for those broadcasters like your Brundles and maybe Crofty, and he can share it with Jakes, or and then you've got like Ted and Rachel and Pinks and all those guys, and you can create a real team around it, and then you charge a decent price. Everyone pays the same. They'll earn an absolute fortune doing it. So I think I think that's the way forward for them. But yeah, I still like the Sky team, even though they've made some changes to their broadcast setup, which I don't like, but I still like them. I think they do a good job. I know people don't like Ted. I love Ted. I think it's the British in me coming, because Ted is just so quintessentially British, and some people just don't like that. But yeah, going back to your point about Crofty, it wasn't the greatest call in the world, and I think they could have done a better job at selling it.
Drop the ball, mate. But massively drop the ball.
I feel like they're trying to get these nice TikTok friendly, lines that they can slap on subtitles and captions, and it'll look nice on a short 20-30 second video.
But time and place, surely, Baxty. This, sadly for Crofty and Brundle, was not that moment. It's a shame.
Brundle on his grid walk and the way he dealt with Mbappe's security was quite funny.
Well,
it's like, no, I'm in charge here. Yeah.
And that's the opposite, right? That went viral almost instantly.
Yeah,
I'm in charge around here, mate. Love that from Brundle. But you know what, it's techie. Go on, and let's talk about Mercedes as custom. A lot of chat about Lewis Hamilton getting sabotaged by the boys and girls over at Brackley and Brixworth. Do tell, Baxty. What do you say to that?
Am I allowed to swear?
Go on.
It's a load of it is what it is. I might have to get beat. Oh my word. Basically, Lewis made some strange comments, didn't he, after quali, when he was like, "Oh, well, I was expecting George to be quicker, and I'm expecting him to be quicker all year." And I don't quite know where he was going. It seemed to me like classic Lewis is in a bad mood because quali hasn't gone well. We've seen it so many times from him, even in the dominant days and when he was competing with Ferrari, he'd be pissed off because he didn't get pole, or, I mean, look how he was after Germany in 2018. He was depressed, so horrified at what had happened. It's just understandable. Sportsman wants to do well, wants to give the best of himself. And Lewis had a good weekend up until that point. Mercedes looked quick, but, and then obviously the news about the wing, the upgraded wing came out, and then the fact that George got it first. Now, to me, that made sense from a few perspectives. George is staying with the team, so it would make sense that if you want to run one part, run it with the guy that's staying with the team, because he can give you a baseline to then potentially expand on that idea on next year's car. Secondly, George is ahead in the World Drivers' Championship.
Oh.
So, and we know that Mercedes don't operate a traditional 1 and 2 dynamic, so you're always going to prioritize, well, not always, but you would 9 times out of 10 prioritize the guy that's ahead in the drivers, which is what Red Bull used to do with Vettel and Webber when they were equal partners before Vettel became the number one. And then obviously the information came out. It's like oh yeah, some reports started coming out that Lewis actually said no to the new wing. He wanted to have a more solid base, and then George said there was going to be a coin toss, and then Shove in the debrief, which came out a couple of hours ago, just said we were going to do a coin toss, but then Lewis said that he would just say, look, I'll let you I'll let George have the win because I don't want to risk starting from the pit lane, which again in Monaco makes sense, makes complete sense. And it seems that the drivers are insisting that if an upgrade is ready, don't wait to have two, let's just have one, because I think they both know they're not realistically in a championship fight this year. So let's just build the data for next year and hit the ground running as hard as we can in 2025 with George and another driver, because they've still not decided who it is yet. So yeah, they're not sabotaging them. I just think they're trying everything they can to bridge the gap to those in front of them as quickly as possible. And yeah, bringing an upgrade to Monaco is always risky, but I just think Lewis slightly underpowered, well, not underpowered car, but slightly less upgraded car, and he's been getting done in qualifying all year anyway. So
the humanity, Baxty. Lewis getting done in qualifying, and what you're saying, absolutely, Baxty, is factually correct. Of the 8 qualifying sessions thus far season to date, Lewis has only taken one off George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk, and that feels like I can't even believe those words are even coming out of my mouth, Baxty. And as far as go on, sorry.
Let's not forget that George was Mr. Saturday. Like, he is quick. Like, I think
yeah, but it's different, Baxter. This
people are very, very quick to dismiss George because he's like, oh, but it's Lewis. It's like, George is very, very fast. Over one lap is probably up there amongst the fastest. Like, he's not quite on a Charles Leclerc level, but he is rapid. So for Lewis to be losing to George over one lap isn't necessarily a bad thing. 7-1 is alarming, but I think there are caveats here. Lewis doing the crazy experiments early on in the season, trying to find the perfect setup, whereas George perhaps was going with a more driver-friendly, quali-oriented setup, because in races, they're a bit more equal. Lewis finds ways to get past George, and, I know George had a couple of bad results, but, I think in race pace, Lewis is still superior to George at the moment, but in qualifying pace, George has just got that little bit of an edge, and it's not much between them. I mean, it's not like a chasm.
But it kind of is, Baxty, because it's in one race. Okay, it'll be a tenth or maybe a tenth and a half.
Yeah.
But multiplied over 8 qualifying sessions, that looks and sounds and feels like a chasm, doesn't it? But and the problem for me is, Baxty, as I put on my accounting cap and try and analyse what's driving this difference. Here are my assumptions, right? Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion, one of the best that I've ever seen. Quick as the proverbial on stick. So I then need to go about explaining. I don't think normalised for performance. I don't think George, as quick as he is, as good as a driver as he is by all accounts, I don't think George is 7-1 quicker than Lewis Hamilton. So I need to try and explain that away, Baxter. And Lewis Hamilton fans around the world also are desperately trying to explain that away, right? Because ostensibly, at face value, 7-1 doesn't pass the smell test. That's not to say it can't happen, because George is quick, but it just doesn't look and feel right. And that's when you get loads of Lewis Hamilton fans around the world leaning into their tinfoil hattery, right, and saying, hold on, hang on, what's going on here? Genuinely, let me try and analyse this. And then you get the bloody pit stops. It's like, wait, so hold on. A Mercedes, are we stupid or incompetent? Like, is it? Is
the outlap thing?
100%, brother. Like, what's going on here? Like, I get it. For my money, it just sounds like an innocent mistake. But you understand why Lewis Hamilton fans around the world, who are already like, well, George can't be that quicker. He's just not. It might be like 1 or 2 sessions quicker than Lewis, but 7-1 just feels wrong. And then Lewis pulls fire on that flame by coming out in front of the world's press and media and saying, well, I had all this pacing in free practice. I don't know what's happened. I don't know where it's gone. Maybe they're turning down my car. And all of a sudden, Baxter, you have yourself a situation, right? This is as for in F1 terms, this has become Hiroshima and Nagasaki all of a sudden, right?
So
do you know what I mean?
yeah, so I looked into the only race I didn't look at was China, because obviously it was a sprint weekend and then it rained and the comparisons between them were not fair. But the other 7 races, I looked at the gap between, well, Japan was FP3, but the rest FP2 or sprint quali, and looking at the differences between them and the improvements that were being made. And Lewis and George were making pretty similar improvements. George was marginally better with his improvement. I mean, we're talking 4/100ths in terms of average improvement between practice and quali. So there isn't actually a lot of difference between them. I think they are losing time to their rivals, to your McLarens, to your Ferraris, to Red Bull. But again, I think early on in the season, Lewis in particular, because he wanted to do that, was messing around with setups that perhaps weren't optimal, whereas George was going down this more stable platform that he wanted. Whereas now, I think, and also there are some tracks that George has always been quicker than Lewis. So like Saudi Arabia, George has always outqualified Lewis in the 3 years they've been teammates and going to that circuit. I always feel like as the season goes on, Lewis just gets better and better. I expect that 7-1 to come down, particularly as we now head to tracks that Lewis is very familiar with, like Canada and Spain, and Silverstone's around the corner as well. And he's not messing around with setups. He's going to have upgrades put on the car. And Mercedes have said they're going to alternate who gets them first as well. So Lewis should get the next upgrade first, should there only be one available.
Should
there be, if they continue to go down this, well, if we've got one ready, we'll stick it on the car.
And this is the point, Baxi. Now people are going to be watching and waiting for any little misstep, and they'll actively, willfully misconstrue incompetence as maliciousness and sabotage. And this is the problem. And Lewis is, I feel the issue, Baxi, here is that Lewis is rebelling against the machine actively now. For the longest time, Lewis has just been impeccable as far as his PR, but now he's saying he's questioning the team in public, right? I don't know where the pace has gone. Maybe somebody's turning down my engine. I'm frustrated with this. There was another one.
Did he say that? I don't think he said that.
The turning down engine.
Yeah,
he did.
I didn't.
100% backs the 100%.
I'll trust you.
100%. It feels like I don't know what's going on between free practice and quali.
I heard that bit, but it was the turning down the engine specifically.
It was like maybe they're turning down the performance. I don't know if he said engine, but turning down performance or something like that.
I mean, I do feel, and Lewis has done this for years, I do feel like he always errs on a setup that's better for the race than for quali. Whereas perhaps George tries to go a bit more down the quali route to get.
But Bax, he's not saying that, is he? And even the last one, the clincher, I've just remembered it now. Pinks is like, what are you talking about? And he says, listen, don't worry about it. I won't out-qualify George for the rest of the season. What? Go on, Baxley. What's he talking about? Because
I didn't understand. I can't explain that. I mean, the only
sabotage. That's what he's a lead. No, I'm not saying that's the thing, but that's what Lewis is saying, or that's what Lewis is trying to tell us without saying it, right?
There's a few ways you can look at it. There's the whole, as I said before, like perhaps they're giving George a bit more priority over with upgrades because of the fact that he's staying, and at the moment he's ahead in the drivers. But Shove has said no, we're going to alternate. Fine, okay. Because there is going to be a point where Lewis is phased out of discussions and isn't part of it because he is leaving. That's only natural. That happens in every single Formula One team. It would happen to Max Verstappen if he chooses to sign for Mercedes, which I don't think is going to happen to those that will be coming at me in the comments. But also there's, perhaps there is the fact that George maybe is prioritising quali over the race and Lewis is more focused on race setup. I can't really explain it without I can't take sabotage seriously. I mean, it's very rare that a motorsport team would do that, particularly Mercedes. I mean, that.
I'd agree. I'd agree with you, Baxley. I don't think it's sabotage what's going on in the background.
But I agree with you where you say that it's understandable that people would think that.
and that Lewis is now saying that's the story here. That Lewis is doing everything to allude to sabotage and foul play in front of the world's press and media, whilst Toto
Not the
Wolff
first
is
time he's done this, though. You pointed this out.
2012, right? Bloody
Yeah.
hell, I had the chaos. 2012 before Spa. Do we need to talk about that? This iteration backstage, it's chaos, right? He does have president, but I think in Lewis's defence, if I do try and defend the 7-time champion for a second, he is ultimately an F1 driver, and it's a knock in. Over the course of the Monaco Grand Prix weekend, the interviewers, the journos asking him questions, we're doing one of these, right? Prodding. It's 6-1, Lewis. What are you gonna? What's the driver of the underperformance? Are you slower really than George Russell? Are you losing a step? That they were prodding at him, and I see why Lewis was just like, well, like, are you really saying that I'm slower than George? I'm not having this. If you want to explain, maybe it's the front wing, maybe the engine's turned down. I'm not driving any different between practice and qualifying. He's reaching for explains, isn't he? Because in Lewis's mind, even at 39 years old, there is no way in hell that George Russell, as brilliant as he is quicker than him in qualifying in absolute terms, full stop, and definitely not quicker to the tune of 7-1.
Yeah.
That's not representative, right?
Was it a fairly similar gap? I mean, not 7-1 bad, but I mean, it was a fairly similar gap in 2022 as well. I mean, there was explanation for that. Lewis had extra weight on the car with sensors because they were trying to find out what the hell was going on with the car. But I seem to remember that George outqualified Lewis a lot in 22. And, Lewis has been outqualified before. I mean, Nico Rosberg outqualified him in 2014. And that was Lewis, one of the best versions of Lewis we've seen. And he still got outqualified by Rosberg. So, I think he has lost just a little bit of edge in qualifying. That's no bad thing. And that happens.
There's that blasphemy door opening again, Baxty.
That's what we were talking about last time. But, he's lost a little bit of an edge, but he's still ridiculously quick. I mean, Hungary last year was proof to that he could drag, a not so good car into a very good position, into pole position. And it was, it's just, as I said, I don't think there's any real shame in losing to George 7-1. George is he is very quick. He didn't get that moniker of Mr. Saturday for nothing. Not
if you're not Lewis Hamilton. Baxi, how do we know that Lewis has lost a step, if we know at all?
It's opinion, and it's just perception of what we see in front of us. But I think, 7-1 is part of that, because you shouldn't, you would expect Lewis to do better. Even against a rapid teammate in George Russell. And he said last year as well, didn't he? He said, look, my qualifying's not been great, and I wonder if those same problems are carrying over. And, sometimes it's often been said by those who have retired, they say the first thing that goes is just a little bit of qualifying pace. Look at Fernando Alonso at the moment. Like, literally, he's put that pen to paper on a new Aston deal, and he's been absolutely rank.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, the humanity backstage.
The humanity indeed. Yeah.
This subject topic is far too heavy a weight for my very fragile shoulders. It's techie. I think where my mind goes to is next year, right? And especially as Charles Leclerc apparently is in the ascendancy. He's now gotten over the Monaco hump. Quickest driver A to B of all of the 20 currently on the grid. How's Lewis gonna fare then? Mate, that's the scary thing. But
I think that Charles will bring out the best. Lewis loves a challenge, and he is at his best when he's being really challenged. And he will see going up against Charles Leclerc across one lap as a proper challenge. He knows George is fast, and I keep going back to this caveat. He's had some issues with setups and everything else, but he'll be confident that he could probably beat George across the rest of the season, despite what he said in that interview. He's got that self-belief of, I'm the best, even at 39 years of age. Charles, different prospect. It is universally acknowledged across one lap, he is the fastest. And I think Lewis will be like, okay. And I think that may have been a motivation for him to go to Ferrari. He's like, I want to take this kid on and see what he's really like. And Ferrari are headed in the right direction as well. If I'm Lewis and I'm seeing next year my team for next year winning races, I'm happy with that.
Mate, I'm pessimism. Cameron is worried, but you know what? Let's wait and see. Talk to me very quickly about the Red Bull situation as we round third base back to the word on the F1 curb is that Checo is going to be privy to a multi-year contract at some point between now and the Montreal Grand Prix. Good or bad decision from the Bulls that are red there?
It's the only decision they could make, really. I mean, Lando said no. Lewis probably said we don't quite know what happened with Lewis. They said no to Fernando because I think they knew Max was going to stay. I I think Max is happy with Checo as his teammate, and if Max is staying, you give him what he wants. However, this could become an issue because I think Red Bull have been caught. Not that I think that Max isn't going to win the drivers, but I think we could get a constructors fight this year potentially. Yeah, I think Red Bull will probably still have a little bit in hand, but you look at Imola and you look at Monaco and how damaging Checo's performances were. But I mean, okay, look, he got taken out in quali, and the most important thing is that in the race, and the most important thing is that he's safe. You know, because that crash was horrendous. But he was awful in Imola, and he got hampered by a poor strategy, but he still didn't execute that well. And then, poor qualifying put him in that position to have that crash with Magnussen.
Well, yeah, okay.
And then you've got both the McLarens delivering. You've got both the Ferraris delivering. If you've got Max on his own, he won the constructors on his own last year. Yeah, that's because they were in a class of one. This year, maybe not so much. And yeah, I think that it's that could come home to roost, because I think one of the major reasons they didn't win the constructors in 21 was because Checo wasn't as good as Bottas. Bottas was the difference maker in that constructors title fight.
Mate, I think this is a really big mistake, an unusually, uncharacteristically big faux pas from team principal Christian Horner's. Usually,
what option do they have available to them other than Carlos Sainz, who probably doesn't want to go up against Max?
Mate, Carlos is that you make that happen, Baxter. If you care, if you're invested in outcomes as much as you are processes, you realise that you have a soft, vulnerable underbelly as far as the Red Bull team are in having Checo Perez, and that's only going to be magnified now that you have the convergence of McLaren under the stewardship of Andrea Stella. Similar story with Frederick Vasseur's red team. Like, this is going to show up now, but before it didn't, when you had like durable competitive advantage in hand over the rest of the field, you can get away with having Checo Perez in the second seat. Now, however, as you've alluded to, Baxter, Houston, we have a problem if you are Christian Horner, and I suspect this could get him in trouble down the line. It's a misstep. Maxty.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the constructors is where the money is. Yeah, I think in 21 they were happy to lose the constructors because they were desperate for Max to get that title. But now they've won 2 in a row, and if they start losing out to McLaren and Ferrari, or both, probably one, they're going to be like, "Well, hang on a minute, we're losing money here," and they're losing Adrian Newey, which is big. That's where it becomes a problem. You put Carlos Sainz alongside Max, you might have some alphas and you might have some butting heads, but if they deliver the results, you can almost guarantee they win the constructors without issue. But yeah, at the moment, I mean, look at the last 2 races. Mate. Norris and Piastri beat Checo Perez. Both Sainz and Leclerc beat Checo Perez. Both Russell and Hamilton beat Checo in Imola, and those 6 drivers finished above him in Monaco. Checo barely made it through that race, but they start to add up over time. And the reason why Checo was brought in was to be that number 2 for Max, because Gasly had failed, Albon had failed, Ricciardo had left and wasn't prepared to be that number 2. And Checo really, apart from on a couple of occasions when he really needed him to, stepped up, hasn't been that solid enough driver to deliver them that Constructors' Championship that somebody like a Valtteri Bottas could do, somebody like a Rubens Barrichello could do in the Ferrari days. there is something to be said for having a very strong number two. And Checo always starts the season well, but we've now hit the mid-season dip.
It's not good enough, bro.
No, it's
Honest,
not. No,
genuinely, it's not good
but
enough. Not in that car,
I
Baxter.
don't think any of the drivers that Red Bull would want to replace him would want to go there because they feel they will look outside looking in. They will feel that it's Max's team, and we don't want to know.
Doesn't matter. But honestly, Baxter, at this point, it doesn't matter. You know, I saw a stat that I feel almost summarises the situation very nicely. The extent of Checo Perez's underperformance. Logan Sargent has been out-qualified by Alex Albon 28 times of 28.
Yep.
Four of those 28 times, however, Baxter, Logan Sargent, in a bloody Williams no less, has out-qualified Checo Perez. Baxter, bruv, let's have a very grown-up conversation. That record in that RB 2019 and 18, that's not good enough if you are Checo Perez. And that shouldn't wash. If you are Christian Horner, if you are that guy as a team principal who doesn't take any SH1T, is all about performance, appeasing and fostering rapport amongst the sponsors, then you can't stand for that unless there's something going on in the background.
That is something else we have to be very conscious of, is that there is other factors at play here beyond performance of the car. I feel that Checo sells merchandise, and I think he has been a massive mover of merchandise for Red Bull in Mexico, in other Latin America countries, that he has been such a great tool for them. And maybe he has felt a little bit of pressure from on high, to be like, look, we really prefer Checo to stay, because he keeps. I mean, if Max was leaving, I'd get it. Yeah, if Max had said, I'm off to Mercedes, you want a bit of stability. You don't want to go. Yeah, a World Championship team does not want to go into a season with two brand new drivers. Have a bit of stability, get your new number one driver in, bed them in, have a decent-ish benchmark in Checo Perez, and then you go from there. But Max is staying. You could realistically make an argument to get somebody else in. I mean, you could put Valtteri Bottas in that car, and I think he'd do a good job. He would be quick enough to challenge Max in quali, and then would play good rear gunner should he need to. He did that for Lewis for years.
Oh, I don't know if I'd go that might be a bit too far for me.
It's an example. I'm not saying they're going to put Bottas in the car, but it's an example.
Stretch. Yeah. I think it's techie. They need to be really careful in financial terms, Baxter, by re-signing Checo Perez to potentially a multi-year deal. They leave themselves naked. They need to hedge, right? You don't know what the future holds, right? Who knew that Christian Horner and the Red Bulls were going to go through whatever they've gone through at the early part of this season? Who knew that Adrian Newey was going to leave? You can't move as if Max Verstappen is going to be at Red Bull ad infinitum. You need to hedge. And the hedge of choice in this circumstance is Carlos Sainz Jr. If 50 million and a multi-year deal is what he's asking, if you are Christian Horner, if he's that guy that I think he is, then surely he's got to make that move, lest he find himself in a situation.
I'd put Yuki Tsunoda in the car.
Well, mate.
I would put Yuki Tsunoda in the car. He's outperforming that RB. He's destroying Ricciardo, let's be honest. Ricciardo's had one result of note this year, and that was a fourth in the sprint, which was brilliant. Don't get me wrong, brilliant. But Yuki Tsunoda is a really, really good driver and is proving himself. Everyone said De Vries would kick his ass. He kicked his ass. Everyone said that Ricciardo would kick his ass. That's not happening. The only driver that got close to him post Gasly was Lawson. And even then, he kind of handled Lawson, because Lawson obviously still needed a bit of time to get back up to speed. But why not Yuki? And then they're potentially going to lose him to Haas.
Well, sometimes, mate, the face doesn't fit right for whatever reason. I don't know if I'm not alluding to any racism or anything like that, but sometimes you're just not the guy, right? You're not the guy for the job. And Yuki Tsunoda could out-qualify Max Verstappen for the next bloody 17 races. I don't think he would still get that. He's just not that guy. No, whatever it is, whatever that is. His destiny
for me is either sitting a year out and going to Aston Martin, or going to Haas, which has been rumoured. And I think that'd be a great move for him.
Haas?
him and Behrman next year.
Bro, you can only do so much in an SH1T car. As far as his independence and him leading the team, that would be a massive morale boost. But you don't want to take a step back as far as the uppermost ceiling of what the car's capable of.
Well, he'd be taking a sideways step at the moment, wouldn't he? Because the RB and Haas are quite evenly matched, I think, at their best. I think RB has better race pace, so that's why I'd rate them above Haas. But it would be, I'd like a sort of slightly downward sideways step.
No, I don't think.
And I think Haas at the moment with Komatsu in charge they are heading in the right direction, I think. And I think if you put, I mean, Behrman's going in regardless, and I think if you stick a Tsunoda in there alongside him, it's a safer, more stable platform than what they've got with somebody who should be getting a race ban but isn't, K-Mag and Hulkenberg, who very quick over one lap but does drop back in the race.
I'm not sure I'm sold on new manager bounce. You've got to normalise for that circumstance. And judge Ayo, bless him, he's a brilliant F1 mind, but judge him over a longer period of time, right? Rather than fail to account for the fabled new manager bounce that many fans across many different sports have fell victim of. But it's techie. Go on then, Baxley. Finally, are you believing that the F1 competitive landscape has levelled somewhat and that we're going to see competition for the 25 points between now and the end of this season, somewhat more than we have done season to date at least?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think we are going to see a bit more competition. I think, Miami I kind of put down to Max having a damaged car and the safety car shenanigans. Don't want to relitigate that. We could be there for hours, but Lando showed that, okay, great. Yeah, and it was great for him to get that win. And I was really happy. But then in Imola, he proved that it wasn't a freak. Yeah, he didn't win, but he proved, McLaren, we're here to stay. Piastri showed that as well in Monaco. Realistically, he could have had pole if he put a lap together. He didn't just quite get there. But yeah, I mean, McLaren are so consistent now across all tracks, and I think Max knows he's not going to have it all his own way. I think Ferrari's going to be interesting because they're coming up to tracks that better suit their car. So I think we could have a decent 5-way fight for the top, the podium places. I'd still back Max to win the championship. I still would back him to win more often than not just because of him in the car, but how good Red Bull are with strategy, how crafty they are. I mean, just quickly on this whole Mercedes outlap thing, Red Bull knew what they were doing. They told Max to speed up to cover up that Lewis. So even if Lewis had done a quick outlap, I still think either Red Bull keep him out or he still comes out because he pushed up behind George. And that just goes to show how crafty Red Bull are, that they managed that situation. And also it was important for them to do that because Checo was out. So, they know what they're doing. Their pit stops are still best in class. If you need a team to deliver you a pit stop under pressure to get your driver in a better position, Red Bull are the one to do it. So, yeah, more competitiveness, but I would still back Max to win maybe 5 or 6 times out of 10, maybe 7.
Well, the rules already, Baxty. As at May 2024, you never back against Max Verstappen. I nearly did this weekend, but I'm quite glad that I didn't, even though it would have been money in the bank. Just set your rules and abide by them.
I mean, Monaco was the one time he made a mistake. I think the first mistake he's made in a while when he just dinked the wall. That was it, and he was struggling with that car. He was, it was Singapore settings really, but Red Bull had got on top of it a bit better. And then you hear Helmut Marko saying we've got correlation problems. I'm like, sorry, is this Mercedes or Red Bull talking?
Not so much correlation problems, just the inherent nature of that car and the suspension and it having very little.
But we've known this with Red Bull cars in the past, that sometimes they are difficult to set up. I mean, look at the 2019 car, look at the 2020 car. They were quick, but very, very difficult to get on top of.
Yeah. All very interesting and bodes well for the F1 fan base that we may get some competition or more competition going forward, courtesy of Andrea Stella's McLaren team and Frederic Vasseur's Scuderia Ferrari. But Baxter, I digress. Wow, I don't know about that, bruv. I don't know about all that. Is Santa Claus going to come down the chimney this year and deliver my Christmas presents whilst we're there? I think not somehow. But listen, mate, you've been a legend. Go and follow Baxty B on Twitter, Baxty B F1 on the YouTubes. If you are watching on the YouTubes, do me a favour, like, comment, subscribe. If you are listening on a podcasting platform, follow and 5 stars, por favor. We have been the Shakedown. That's been Baxty. I've been Cameron F1. And between now and next time, as always, remember to look but never stare. Peace.